When you think of your childhood, you probably think about your school, your friends, and what you did to pass the time of your youth. Chances are, you played video games. In today's video, we take a stroll down memory lane to revisit the 10 video games you played that you forgot about. Number 1. Mortal Kombat. In the early 90s, kids throughout the world spent hours in their dark basements to play the new game, Mortal Kombat. What is now known as one of the greatest games of all time, this new game featured two fighters going head-to-head in combat, with the goal to drain their opponent's health bar to win the game. While this new game was widely embraced by youth everywhere, parents were not so receptive. There was a public outcry by how violent and gory the game was, saying that it wasn't appropriate for kids or teens. An example of this gore was a move called Fatality, in which the fighter kills their opponents in the most gruesome way possible. Since this game was initially released, there were a variety of spin-offs. A new game, Mortal Kombat 2, was released in 1993, and with consistent popularity, a movie was made and came out in 1995. Number 2. Burger Time. In 1982, Bally Midway released the game Burger Time. This could be found in just about every arcade. The premise of this game is for the chef, Peter Pepper, to bob and weave through obstacles on platforms to find the perfect ingredients for the hamburger he's cooking. He has to search for and obtain each ingredient while actively avoiding less important food items. A spin-off called Peter Pepper's Ice Cream Factory debuted just 2 years later in 1984. Then Diner came out. Reception was not all that favorable, so instead of creating spin-offs, the re-releases came. Burger Time Deluxe came with a version for Game Boy in 1991, making the game widely accessible outside of an arcade. Burger Time Delight came out in 2007 for smartphones, and then Burger Time World Tour came in 2011, created for Xbox, PlayStation, and the Wii. Number 3. Duck Hunt. In 1984, Nintendo debuted a new game called Duck Hunt. This game was the envy of every kid in the neighborhood due to the accessory duck hunting gun that came with the game. At this time, gaming accessories were relatively non-existent. This was an exciting new addition to the game, where the goal was to shoot as many ducks as you could. There was no strategy to the game, other than to shoot the ducks down. While this was the third grossing video game in 1985, critical reviews called this mind-numbing. Number 4. Donkey Kong Country. In 1994, Nintendo released one of the most popular console games of the mid-90s. Donkey Kong Country was a reboot of the original Donkey Kong. In this new version, the focus is still on the gorilla star Donkey Kong. In this reboot, there is an addition of a new adorable character, Diddy Kong. Donkey Kong's sweet little nephew runs around the jungle country with his uncle with their collective goal of recovering their lost bananas. The gorilla duo must go through 40 levels to ultimately find and regain control of their banana horde from the evil crocodilian crumlings. This game seemed to have endless tricks up its sleeve. Playing for hours on end could result in mastering multiple levels. It could also be entirely frustrating, being stuck in one level battling over barrels in a then dynamically designed vibrant jungle, or being stuck on a level set in the depths of the deep, dark earth, riding in minecarts on rickety tracks. While the game was focused on Donkey and Diddy Kong, a player could be overcome with excitement when a new character could be broken out of a crate to help win the level. The crates would rattle from side to side or slightly gyrate, stimulating that there was an animal trapped in the crate. En Garde was a swordfish that could be used underwater, and you could ride on top of him. Squawks was a parrot that came with an illuminating lantern to light up the dark caves. A fan favorite was Rambi, a rhinoceros that could run and charge opponents and bust down doors. Espresso was a spunky ostrich who could jump high and fast. The enormous gorilla looked hilarious riding a wild, colorful ostrich. Last in the crate-bursting bunch is Winky, a frog that could leap higher than any animal. Half the fun was finding the animals. The other half was watching Donkey Kong climb on them and make them carry him around. It brought an innocent humor to the game. This game was a massively successful reboot. Number 5 is Street Fighter 2. In 1987, Street Fighter came into the world via an arcade console. With 6 buttons on the console, for the player to navigate the game, Street Fighter offered commands and moves that hadn't been seen before. In 1988, it was released for at-home use on more compact consoles. Fast forward to 1991 and the newer, better version came blaring onto the gaming scene. The improvements made to Street Fighter 2 were in both visuals and technique. Players at home had the ability to now select from a wide range of characters with distinct fighting styles. Players could also learn more technical combination moves that came much more complex than what previous fighting games offered. All versions of the Street Fighter II game have grossed more than $10 billion in revenue. The worldwide praise for this game was emphatic. It is credited as the game that changed the genre and popularity of fighting games. Number 6. NBA Jam. In the early 90s, arcades started to buy and display a variety of games. Arcades were a place for kids to hang out. It's a unique place where they can linger, hang out, and relax without being in someone's basement with a parent constantly checking in under the guise of freshening up the snacks. And I'm sure every kid in the 90s already spent plenty of time traipsing around their local mall. In 1993, NBA Jam rolled into arcades to the delight of the basketball fans everywhere. Sports-themed games didn't really exist at this point. Games were low-tech with digitized design, with the likes of funny entertainment like Burger Time or with fighting games. Up until this point, the sports genre in gaming didn't exist. Thankfully, that all changed when Midway rolled out NBA Jam. The excitement of this game was that it wasn't just a basketball game. It was the actual National Basketball Association with the real licensed teams on the screen. With your friends, you could play 2-on-2 basketball in your favorite team's arena. It felt so much more legitimate and cutting edge than other games. Even comparing it to a game like Duck Hunt, where everything just felt completely pretend and silly, this game with a branded franchise and jerseys with the names displayed on the back of each athlete, it just felt much more real. One of the most fun things to do in the game was to make a fast break down the court, beating your opponent, jumping insanely high, going in for a slam dunk. The amount of air you could catch was comical, and the dunk was such an over-the-top move. It left players either crackling up or pissed off, depending on who you were in the game. The only bummer about the game was that you couldn't be Michael Jordan. NBA Jam wasn't able to secure the licensing to feature him or the Chicago Bulls. However, it did leave just about every other athlete in the league from 1992 to 1994. This left you with a vast array of options to select any player. Does anyone remember morphing into Clyde the Glide from the Portland Trail Blazers? It was a classic 90s fun. The game was ultimately released from the shackles of arcade ownership, and a home edition was developed. While Jordan was missing from the public version of the game, he hired someone to develop the game so he could personally play himself in the game in his own home. Well, that's not fair, man. We want to play the game as the person who is widely considered the greatest of all time. That hurts. Regardless, this game spawned an entire genre of sports gaming that not only created multiple iterations of NBA games, but generated excitement for what else might come out. Sports fans everywhere knew that something big was happening in gaming, and they were right. Games related to the NFL, hockey, baseball, and just about every team sport imaginable came to fruition. Number 7. The Sims. Every so often, there is a game that creates a cult-like following. In 2000, Maxis and Electronic Arts unveiled The Sims, and what happened after its release was pretty shocking. The game was unlike any other game on the market, truly in its own genre. It wasn't a fighting game or a sports game, and the goal of the gaming protagonist wasn't to beat an absurd amount of levels to win some gigantic prize. The Sims creator, Will Wright, turned personal tragedy into massive unforeseen success. Wright shared that he lost his house in the Oakland firestorm of 1991, and it inspired him to develop a virtual dollhouse. In this inspiring comeback story, he created a world in which the person playing the game could create their own dream house. But this game wasn't about construction or architecture. The player could create a person, selecting the occupation, personality, clothing, and even hobbies of that character. Furthermore, they could make a seemingly infinite number of decisions about where the character lived. Did you want to install hardwood floors in their kitchen or tile? Did you want them to have a dog or a pet fish? Were they an accountant or a pediatrician? The decisions that you could make were endless. It could be an addicting game, trying to outline an entire life that you created. The game was also incredibly positive. After the 90s churned out fighting games, this came onto the scene with an entirely different kind of attitude. You could take your time and build this life. Your character wasn't dead after 30 seconds of a fight. You could post up on the couch and play for hours, perfecting every detail in this simulated life. What came was a wide embrace of the game. The Sims had sold 6.3 million copies of the game. The game creator continued to expand the franchise by creating a variety of iterations of the game, offering expansions, including house parties, hot dates, university, and even pet-themed simulations. Just like the initial world itself, the opportunities for the game developer were endless. They created dozens of game expansions and ultimately created SimCity. Number 8. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. In 2003, the most widely known skateboarder, Tony Hawk, came out with a video game, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Up until this point, sports games featured team sports like basketball or football. This game busted open the genre to include the alternative world of skateboarding. This alternative scene was punctuated by the punk rock and ska music that were featured in the game. This game, which was developed for PlayStation, put the player in the body of Tony Hawk. The goal was to perform as many ollies, grabs, flips, and slides as possible. Like most competition games, the goal was to gain as many points as possible and beat your opponent by landing as many of those skills as you could. Number 9. Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? In 1985, Broderbund created an educational game called Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? Unlike any other game on the market, this game was educational. In this thought-provoking game, the game always started by learning about a wild event that occurred, like thievery. Upon learning this, the player had to search for the culprit through a series of clues and trivia to find out where the potential villain was hiding. Through this battle of wit, if you've played and secured the right answers, you'd find yourself locking away Carmen Sandiego. This game became such an educational hit that HarperCollins ended up buying it from Broderbund. Number 10. The Powerpuff Girls. The kindergarten superhero trio Powerpuff Girls had their own video game created, which came out in the year 2000. Made for Game Boy Color, players could vividly see the pink, green, and blue superheroes in the new colorful Spender. Unfortunately, that was just about the only highlight of the game. Young girls will probably remember back on this fondly, remembering that there was a game created for a popular cartoon for them. However, critics noted the lack of purpose and strategy for the game itself. Oh well, you can't win them all. With all of these games, one thing is clear. There are so many fun games to play based on whatever you're into. From fighting games to sports games, there is something for everyone. And we're so glad developers can continue to keep us entertained.